is always... Hello, good morning everybody. This is Dr. Radhika here, and I'm very happy to be with you today morning to share my thoughts on funding for entrepreneurs. Every entrepreneur, big or small, in whatever stage they may be in, whether you're in growth or you're in a startup, or if you are in your mature stage, in any stage, they always keep looking for funds. And today, I'm going to talk about a few things, that is, when to fund, what are the various sources for funding, are there external and internal sources of funding, short-term, long-term funding, what are the processes that you have to follow while funding, and some tips on funding. So, in a life cycle of any company, there is always a very set pattern. You are a startup, you have an ideation, then you grow, and then you have a rapid growth where you're really soaring, and then you reach a mature stage where actually your company is doing very well and set in its systems, and then it's looking for poised for diversification, etc. You also come to a stage where there would be a decline, because anything there has to be a decline too. And that is a wave when it's ending. That's another stage where you need to put a lot of interferences to pull your wave up again by either doing diversification or expanding your market or coming up with some innovative measures. Now, during this life cycle, you may need different types of funds depending on which stage you are. So the first thing that we have to remember is, whenever we are funding, that the life cycle, the stage the company is in, depends a lot on what type of funding you want, how much funds you want, and where you want it. So let us see what is that. So in the beginning, if you are on your ideation stage and you are looking at whether your idea is going to really work out, you require what is called a seed funds. So seed funds, usually seed funds is given by 3 F's, friends, family, and father-in-law is the third one, or friends, family, and fools, they say, as per the saying goes. But the seed funds is usually brought in by the entrepreneur themselves. But many times, if you see, especially students, college students, that this is also not possible. So the government has stepped in with a lot of seed funding nowadays. This is one of the biggest scarce resources today in any country, and especially in our country. And therefore, seed funds has been given a lot of focus, especially now recently. There are 10,000 crore, and the fund that has been created for startups will probably set the seed funds flowing. When you are a startup, that means you've already established, you require a lot of funds for buying your assets, or creating assets, or setting up your business, setting up your operations. You require 2 types of funding, one for operations and one for assets. And when you're in your growth stage, obviously you need more of your operational money, and you also need to know how to expand your markets, for which you require more funds. In the mature stage, you require, again, maintenance and for diversification in case you're going for mergers, acquisitions, or you're looking at any diversification, etc. Especially when you're on the declining stage, you need to look at, as I told you, an innovative approach, or something that will pivot your business again on the top. For any revamping, any reinforcements, you're looking at taking in new partners, mergers, acquisitions. In any of these things, you definitely require money, as we all know. But I want to reiterate that it is the stage of the cycle that the company is in, and the reasons why you require money, which plays a very important role as a parameter in deciding what type of funds you require. Now, there are only 2 types of funds. Basically, everything falls as instruments under these 2 categories. One is called debt, and the other is called equity. I think most of us know that. But debt, I would just like to stop here and just tell you that equity is ownership funds and debt is borrowings. Now, if you look at whether it's a debt or as an equity, you may have a combination of both. You can have all equity, or all debt is not possible. But still, these are some of the scenarios that you have. How much debt, how much equity that should be there in your business depends greatly on your needs as well as on your business model. If you are, let's say, a fertilizer company which has a huge asset base, then obviously even for a 1 rupee equity, you can take a 3 rupee debt, right? Because those guys are very happy to give you money because they have a huge asset on which they can lean on as security. On the other hand, if you're in a new technology business and this technology is just backed by your patent, then it becomes a little difficult to get the debt because these guys do not have a hold on your this as an asset, not big assets. So they're a little uncomfortable giving debt. So borrowing becomes a little difficult because for every 1 rupee of ownership, you'll probably be able to borrow max 50 paisa or at the most 75 paisa. Big major breakthrough thing, you may probably get 1 for 1. So in these type of businesses, then it's better to go in for equity. That's where these VCs and all these guys come in, because they'll private equity guys all come in, because there they can take part in the ownership. Also, so debt and equity, let's see what are the various instruments. Now, debt or equity could be internal or external funds which can come in. And it can be long-term or short-term, depends on if it's operational, it's usually short-term. Equity is always long-term. Debt can be long-term or short-term. So let us just look at some of the external funding sources, right? Of course, if you look at the growth entrepreneurs and all that, we always first source has always been the bank. I'm not going to talk much about banks, but I'm going to talk about other funding, and we can come back to banks a little later if we have the time. I would like to talk about newer sources of external funding. Now, most of these entrepreneurs, all of you must have been already familiar with the bank and the government grants and subsidies. Albeit these subsidies come very late, 2-3 years lagging, but definitely they come to you. And these two are the things, is a big bane and a boon for all entrepreneurs. And and in fact, you cannot do without these guys, right? But let's see what are the other options that are available now for entrepreneurs. The first I'm going to talk to you about the first 3 things is the angels, the venture capitalists, and the private equity. Now, if you look at all these 3, they come in the form of equity. Angels come in the form of debt. Sometimes come in the form of borrowed funds, right? Debt they can give you, but usually they all prefer to come as a part of equity. Now, why do these guys come? These guys come for a simple reason. They are looking for a huge return at the end of the day, right? And they feel that your idea has got power. Not necessarily that they only come for startups, right? They also come for second round, mezzanine, for third round. You have different rounds, right? So in various levels, they could keep coming and giving funds for different reasons. So these guys come only for a big return. They're looking for a fantastic exit route. So they are normally with you between 1 to 7 years, between 3 and 7 years usually. And these guys then definitely are not interested in your business per se. They're interested in making money out of the business because they see a huge potential in your business. Now, if you go to public equity, what happens is public equity is what is called as the IPO, or the initial public offering, where you actually put forth your ownerships, your equity shares to the public, and the public then subscribe to it. And this is also usually the exit route for the top 3 guys, the angels, the venture capitalists, and the private equity. I will be talking more about it as we go further up. The strategic investors are those guys who actually are having a vested interest in your business, and therefore they are looking at a point of giving you money so that their whatever they're looking for in your business is secured. So strategic investors, for example, I can give you is, let's take, there's a company called MeritTrack, and MeritTrack is the guys who actually do the corrections, online corrections of your online tests, and they're the first of the kind. So they had a lot of venture capitalists also who were backing them. They also had a strategic investor in terms of Manipal University, who would also love to have this type of evaluation being done for their exams, etc. So here they become the strategic investor. I'd like to talk a lot more about customer funding in a little more while from now. And I'll be talking a lot about crowdfunding and what is leverage buyout and factoring. Though factoring is still very nascent in our country, I will be talking more about it in a little while from now. So these are the things that I will be talking about when we're talking about external funding. But when you talk about internal funding, we are talking about plowing back your profits, which I'm very sure many of you entrepreneurs must be laughing. But yes, this is one of the ways in which you can actually fund yourself by actually bootstrapping, which is the last thing I was saying, by not taking in the profits out of your business, but by bootstrapping it is by putting it back into your business. And I know of an entrepreneur in Goa who he was saying that all his friends who had studied, who were working, had bought all cars and bikes. I mean, his dream was to buy a bike, but he was still going in his old scooter, Lambretta scooter, because he was plowing back the profits. Today, he's one of the top most entrepreneurs in Goa in the Varna industrial estate. So we are looking at profits and how it can be plowed back. It is a very patient game, and if you're willing to wait and not to take out your money so fast, then it becomes a good source of funding. And of course, sale of assets which are not of use to you, you should not just keep it to occupy space, but if you sell it off immediately, at least you can make some money. It's always better to lease it, whether it's an operational lease or a financial lease. Leasing actually brings in a lot of funding because you don't have to invest a huge amount of money, you only have to pay the lease rent. But one of the most important ways of funding is by tightening up your operations, right? I'm talking more to these growth entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who are quite well settled. You get so settled in a system that that change becomes a very, very taboo word. Though you may make microscopic changes. What I'm asking is that if we were to look at your processes, study your processes, and see whether any of these things are repeated, and there has been a big, huge, silos which creep in between your processes. Now, processes are nothing but a set of tasks arranged in a sequential order, right? Your buying process, your selling process, your administration process, so on and so forth, your business processes. If you were to study the processes one by one and see where you can shorten the process and make it the best, re-engineer the processes, then there'll be a whole lot of money that can be released. Because your jobs and the job functions change, there'll be a lot of cross-functionals that can happen. So operational efficiency is by far one of the top ways of raising funds internally, because it's within your control and you are the decision maker as an entrepreneur. And believe me, if you were to restudy your processes and actually change the processes, if you were to start the business today, how would these processes have been? And if you were to change this, believe me, you will find that a whole lot of your stocks or your cash, especially the first asset or the first impact, will be on your operational funds. And of course, if you want to bring in more internal funding, you can bring in more equity, bring in new partners, bring in your own money, etc., etc. Of course, there are a lot of long-term and short-term instruments of borrowing. If you look at short-term, we have trade credits. You have your overdrafts which the bank gives you. Trade credit is what your supplier gives you, 2 months credit, 60 days, 90 days, etc. Bills receivable, promissory notes, of course, these are the things that you can actually discount and get money from the bank. And these are also the instruments which you can factor. Is your receivables, which can be sold off to the factor, and the factor will do the collection and you for a small amount of money, and this way you can also release your money. When you talk about long-term instruments, there is the long-term instrument of borrowing is debt, and of course the long-term instrument of ownership is actually equity. So between debt and equity, you can normally take only debt can come for short-term, equity is usually long-term. How else can you raise funds for your working capital, right? Your operational funds. As I already told you, we already talked about profit, sale of assets. And I'm talking about inventory reduction. One of the biggest places that you can always raise your money is in your inventory. Are we keeping the inventory at the right stock level? More often than not, we are in a panic mode where we actually store stock more than that is necessary. Or we are in a cringe mode where we actually don't store even little. So we are too dependent on the neighbor and say, oh, this is available nearby and we can buy immediately. So these things are, if we could plan out our inventory, it would release a lot of money. You're looking at late payments, and I am very sure all of you must be very much in sync with what I say is late payment, right? One of the ways is to actually pay at the last date, you know, so that you can rotate your money. Now this goes for you, it also goes for your customer, right? So how much to lag it, how much to stretch it is a decision that each one of us have to make. And stretching should not be at the cost that our name in the market starts falling down. Now, another thing that you can always do is quicken your collections, and that is by, you know, without offending your customers, gently remind them about the dates. Another thing is where you can actually talk to your bank and reschedule your loan terms depending on, suppose you suddenly have a good contract and you could actually talk better terms with your bank. Then you can reschedule your loan terms after talking to the bank. One of the most important ways in which your operational funds can actually keep flowing is by having a very stringent cash flow management technique, which means you need to have a cash budget. Many of us entrepreneurs, normally we have it in our mental makeup, you know, oh, this money is coming next month, or ye 20 days ke baad aa jati hai, ye, you know, next month, June mein ye aa jata. But the thing is, we should be very clear is by putting it in a book and looking at your monthly flows, your cash inflows, cash outflows have to be monitored by writing them down. It's very easy because as entrepreneurs, we then give it to our assistants and our team members to look after that. But as entrepreneur, as an owner of the business, this should be very much in your mobile phone, perhaps on your fingertips. Nowadays we can't say that, we have to say it's on your mobile phone. Make sure that you have your cash budget, your cash flows for the entire year fitted into your in your palm of your hand. So operational costs I already talked to you about. One of the other ways in getting phrasing funds is through your credit cards. Entrepreneurial credit cards are much available, and of course the bank always is there to give you a loan, and it is a tedious task, but yes, they do. They are there for us, and I'm very sure that we just need to, we have now so many, like BYST for example, which is an NGO which helps entrepreneurs, actually only youth entrepreneurs up to the age of 35 is their thing, help them to secure loans from banks by helping to put their documentation right, and they also do a lot of mentoring. So we do have such you know, NGOs, like perhaps even you have huge mentoring like Wadhwani Foundation does, where they help you in actually setting right your businesses through mentorship by putting all your documentations and help you putting your documentation in order and help you setting up your systems in place, those sort of things. So funds are often applied for different purposes, you know, I think we already saw this, and but you see these angels, they normally are there with you during the startups, but venture capitalists come after startup. Venture capital guys are a little more, you know, careful. They come after seeing whether you have your traction of customers, you have very good potential, you're doing very well, and you're just struggling to break through. So that's when these guys come in. So venture capitalists is good for you after about 2 to 3 years, whereas angel investors is good for you right at the beginning of the startup. Seed funds are good for you at in the beginning, and self-finance is the best. Private equity is something that I'm going to talk to you next, and we already saw this, right? Okay. So let's talk about private equity. Now, I'm going to rest a little more on private equity because I find that this source of fund is becoming huge in India, and it's highly popular among all types of entrepreneurs, be it growth, startups, etc. So private equity guys are special financiers. They are basically firms which set up funds. So they set up a fund which is called a private equity fund, and in these, based on these fund, what they do is they take this fund and invest it in various startups or various potential companies which are going to do really good, and they come in the form of equity for these companies, and they exit after a couple of years, making that money and then share it to the fund holders. So they are just a vehicle who collect the fund, invest the fund in startups and other MSMEs, and then once the MSMEs do well, they exit it out and the fund is closed. You have closed-ended fund, open-ended, different kinds. Now, these guys will come to any entrepreneur who's got a fantastic track record of the business, and they believe that this company has got a fantastic, potential to expand, and this is going to give you a return. They have a fantastic earning because it's always good to earn while you own, and they have a great exit, which means the shares are going to sell like hotcakes, and the earning potential of the company is superb. Now, this requires a very careful selection of entrepreneurs, and also as entrepreneurs, I should also warn you all that you too need to be very, very careful when you select your private equity guys. The guys who are going to back you or give you money, because you need to know whether they're going to be with you throughout or will they leave you in the middle. So this is very, very important. Now, if you look at some of the examples that I'm planning to give you, is there's one of the top private equity players is Blackstone, and I'm going to talk to you about an entrepreneur in Bangalore, Satyanarayana, who started what is called as the Central Parking Solutions. Central Parking Solutions is a company which gives you parking solutions. So if you go to an airport or you go to any mall, there's a whole lot of parking problems, and you have this parking systems that happen, and his company is the one who actually takes care of the entire parking systems. So he started off as an entrepreneur, and after a couple of 3 years, when his company was really growing big, and he just had 2 contracts, and then he was already getting most of the mall contracts across the country. That's when Blackstone stepped in and gave him money to actually expand his business and run. So you have such types. Let's take multiples. It started by Renuka Ramnath, the person who actually is the backbone behind ICICI Ventures, and she made it a huge success. So in 2009, she founded her own private equity fund, ma'am, and it's been a record. Multiples has got a huge fund, and they normally look at entrepreneurs, especially MSMEs, and they are into companies which are already on the growth path, and they provide funds for these things. So you can also see that some of the other private equities have been Tiger Global, ASL. You have many of these guys. All you need to do is to check whether these guys are actually fit for you, and we will see that in what are the things that you need to see before you go in for an investor in a little while from now. These are again some more examples of companies which have been funded by private equity, and on the right you see the private equity investors, and these are some of the companies. Most of the pharmaceuticals are usually private equity based. Of course, you have Kalyan Jewellers, Laurus Labs Private Limited, Cartrade.com, all this by the private equity Warburg Pincus. They are one of the leading private equity guys. Tastemark again is another very important private. So, so guys, basically, if you look at these private equity guys, they are the guys who will help you actually expand your equity. So, if you're looking for funding, then it's very good for you to approach a private equity guy first, if you're an established MSME. If you are a startup, then you better go to an angel. But if you are somewhere in between and you really look, you can go in for venture capitalists. So venture capitalists and private equity, not much, except venture capitalists are professionals and private equity is through a fund. Private venture capitalists could also be a bit of angels. So there is hardly, not much of a, definite borderline. They just mingle with one another. So we talked about angels. You have the Hyderabad angels, you have the Chennai angels, you have the Indian Angel Network, you have seed funds. Of course, seed funds is more for seed funds. They're, as their name suggests, they are the guys. The Harvard Alumni Angels Association, India Quotient. We have many of these angels. Of course, your nearby money lenders near your house are all angels, right? And these are the guys, if you see, more than in the recent research, more than 75% of our MSMEs, the first thing they borrow is from their nearby money lenders. Very simple, because they find that though they're paying a very high interest rates, up to 25 to more than 25%, these guys are most dependable because they give you money immediately and there's no much of hassles for this. So you will find that these guys are here to stay, right? But the question is, as I'll talk to you later, a little while from now, when do we borrow money plays a very important role, because desperation always also leads to terms that may be even harmful to us at the end of the day. So angels are guys who actually believe in your potential and put money, usually even in as a seed fund. Now, when you look at venture capitalists, of course, there's Tiger, IDG Ventures, Sequoia. And these guys, venture capitalists actually became famous in the Silicon Valley, and everybody thought, these guys are very famous only for funding IT and IT companies. But it's just a myth, because venture capitalists are been there from time immemorial. Even when Queen of Spain gave a bag of gold to Vasco da Gama, asking him to find a route to India, she knew that if he found, she's going to capture the entire spice market of Europe. But if he didn't, then she's going to lose a bag of gold. Now, these guys are the same, right, in the modern world. But with what happens is, normally between 7 or 8 years, these guys make their big money, right? It's even out of 7 investment, if one shoots up, it's a star. They've made money for life. So these are the guys who actually take the maximum risks, right? And if you look at these venture capitalists, for example, they get more into IT because the gestation period is not 7 but about 3 years. So that's why venture capitalists move faster into IT and ITES base, because the gestation period is so small that they make money, big money, in a very short period of time. But venture capitalists are also now venturing into all areas, especially clean energy, healthcare. We are all over the place now. For example, you have You Look Good, a chain of beauty parlors which have been financed by venture capitalists in Bangalore. Bolster Juices has been financed by venture capitalists. So we have many of these guys, who are now being funded by venture capitalists, clearly not IT. And you have many of these ventures, Nexus, Accel. Of course, I want to talk here a little about impact investors, right? Impact investors are venture capitalists who actually fund companies, not only looking for a return economic, but also looking for a social return. So like venture capitalists like Avishkar, right? Or I'll come back to you. These are the guys who actually look for a bit of a social return, and look for a little lesser economic return. And they are very, very patient. They are there with you for a long term to come, and they look for companies which have a social implication, which actually cater to the bottom of the pyramid. Those sort of things is what that they look for. So whether it's private equity, venture capital, or angels, each one of them typically invest in businesses which have a very good track record. That's very, very important. And they come at large funds, whether it is for expansion or for growth. They take the risks and help you share the risks with the owners. That is something very, very important. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little more about customer funding as a part of sources of funds. Now, many of you will laugh and say, is it possible? In many of the meetings that we've had with entrepreneurs at the Wadhwani Foundation, I found that many of these entrepreneurs, especially guys with HR agencies, and they keep saying we don't have the money and we get paid after only after we place the people and then we get the money. So till then, all the money is being footed by us. I agree with you on one score. Customer funding as a source can happen only in certain business models, not in all business models. So if you're lucky and if you are belonging to a business model which can be customer funded, let's take a look. This is by actually John Mullins, has come up with this of the London Business School. If you look at the matchmaker model, right? Now these kind of businesses normally are like an agency that links two things together, like your real estate or your eBay or those sort of dog vacations, sort of these things. So what these guys do is they connect you two people together, right? So matchmaker models are the first place that you can actually get funded, right? If you look at the pay in advance model. Now, for example, in matchmaker model, let's take an eBay. Where do they make money from? The buyer and the seller are linked in eBay. Now, each of them actually pay some amount of money to get into the platform. Now, that's where they make their money. So the money is already come, and then they allow them to use the platform. When you look at pay in advance, this is where you place an order, pay the money, then it's getting built, like Dell Computers did. You pay the money, you do the specification of what type of a computer you want, pay the money, then they start building it. The subscription model is, of course, usually the newspaper model, where 1 year you pay the subscription and then the things come to you, right? Similarly, like your school fees, you first take the fees and then the service comes to you. Now, scarcity-based models are models where actually you actually keep very, very, very less amount of inventory, and you actually buy the inventory only after the inventory is placed. Service top products are basically all service-oriented thing, where you're actually building a product in the form of a service. The service itself is a product. Now, those type of things you can actually take money and say, okay, as I'm doing the service for you, I will build the product. So, getting funds from your customer is something very, very useful, provided your business model allows you to do this. Ideally, that would be nice if your customer can all pay you before you even give your services, but not for all, right? So let's look at another source, that is a strategic investor. So as I told you, a strategic investor is when your supplier or your customer funds you to keep you in the value chain, right? It's a win-win for both because they want you on their value chain. For example, if you look at masala owners and all that, they normally fund these micro entrepreneurs who make jeera powder or masala powder and those sort of things, and then they buy back the product from them. Or if you take like Arun ice creams, etc., these guys and all, they take care or help the farmers, adopt villagers, give them money for running their dairies, buying fodder for their cow, one particular type of fodder in which the milk will have more cream content. Those sort of things are called a strategic investment. Now I'm going to come to another very important source of funding, which is now gaining grounds in India. It's been abroad, it started abroad in Africa with Kiva, but this is the practice in which funding a project by raising contributions from public, typically via the internet. So you have these companies like Wishberry or a BitGiving, all these guys, what they do is they've created a platform where if you want funds, you go and put up your project and put it aboard. People who have money and who are looking for investments will actually come to the website, see which is the project that they would like, their pet project or the one after their heart, and then will decide to invest money. Now, abroad, this has become more professional. It can be in the form of equity-based or debt-based. But in India, it's still more a contribution-based because the SEBI rules is still not yet firm on this. So, we are more reward-based rather than equity or debt-based. In which case, when you put in money, you'll probably get a photo of the tribal who made the product, and probably you could get a discount on the product or things like that, or you get free tickets for the movie that you have funded, those sort of things. So crowdfunding is still nascent, but it's fast catching up, and there are a lot of rules which are now getting made, which are going to go through the parliament for this. Public equity, I think all of us know a lot, and when we're looking at public equity is when we actually put our shares on the block. For that, you need to be a little more steady. You should have had a good run in the market, and you should have already made a brand, or you should have some recognition in the market before you actually go in for an IPO. And once you're an IPO, and then you need to get your listing done in the stock exchange, and then from then on you're a big man, you're going big, you'll be growing big. Of course, you still require money, and if you require more money, you can bring in more equity, you can widen your equity base, or go in for more debentures, debts, and other sort of things. Banks, of course, there is one particular scheme that is really catching up as a new source of funds for entrepreneurs today, and that is the CGT MSME scheme, which is the credit guarantee scheme, wherein up to 1 crore entrepreneurs are getting loans without collateral security. Of course, that doesn't mean your interest is not there. There is interest, and this interest is base point plus 4 or works around 14%. And there is, of course, discounts for women entrepreneurs, and there is a discount for ex-army men and so on and so forth. But there is no collateral security. And this is very important because it just works on your personal guarantee. This, of course, there are a set of rules. It's not given for retail, and it is available only for service and product manufacturing, and not for retail. So these are some of the new things. The banks have also been coming up with a whole lot of new schemes, and of course now we also have a new bank which is only there for entrepreneurs, the Mudra Bank, and I'm very sure that all these years bank have played a very important role in the lives of MSME, and they have contributed to the growth, and they will be there. And I'm very sure with all the mechanization and with all the IT, we're only going to see the role of the banks in a much bigger role, and therefore banking and keeping your banking transactions is very, very vital for every entrepreneur, and therefore antagonizing your bank will only serve in being a problem for you later on. So getting to know the bank, getting to know the bank rules, and keeping up to the rules, which means you need to instill self-discipline in you in terms of financial discipline. It augurs well because everybody around you is happy, whether it's bank or whether it's any kind of investors. One of the things that they look for before they fund you is what is your financial discipline. Financial disciplines play a very, very important role. What is financial discipline? Keeping your accounts correctly. This is one of the biggest problems of many entrepreneurs whom I've seen, is that though you may have a fantastic accountant, you may have Tally, you may have the best of the systems, still the accounts are awry. The thing is, if you are going to keep your systems in order, if your accounting is in order, today we have a plethora of companies, of institutions which do this help. In fact, I know a couple of accounting bookkeeping firms which come to your office for 400 rupees a month or 250 rupees a month, come and collect all your bills and bookkeep it for you. In fact, nowadays there's another one in Hyderabad wherein they don't even come to you. You just need to snap on WhatsApp the photo of your bill and keep sending it to them, and they keep your bookkeeping, and once a week they'll come and give you your statements. So when you are having so much of newer and newer things coming, I think sticking to the old way of doing things is something that mature entrepreneurs need to give a second thought on. The old way of doing things is good, but there is also a better way of doing things. And this is what you have to remember, because as entrepreneurs, change is nothing to you. So keeping it dynamic, keeping it moving with times, keeping your financial decisions, keeping your financial disciplines is very, very vital. This will improve. Today also, MSMEs have the Semera and other credit rating agencies who actually rate your credit. If you can get that done, I think that will be one of the most easiest ways in order to ease in the process of funding yourself. So what's funding procedure? You've decided various things. You've decided where you are, what's your stage. You have to decide how much you want. That's very, very important. Why you want the funds, right, is something which you need to be very clear, and how much you want. This definition is the starting point of funding. Once you decide when you want, why you want it, how much you want, you need to then start studying the various sources. Which would be better? Should I go here? Should I do this? Should I do this? Right? Each type of funding has got a cost. And this is called, in the terminology, is cost of capital, which means every source has got a cost. For example, if you borrow, you have to pay interest. That interest is a cost. The cost of actually commuting to the bank or who was going to give you a loan some 10-15 times is again a cost. Calling them up and talking to them is again a cost. So all this is a cost for raising capital. You have a cost for floating equity. You put advertisements, you build up marketing costs and all, and say, hey guys, come and buy the shares. So all these are again cost of equity. So anything that you raise has got a cost. The cost of raising money or the cost of capital is something you need to keep in mind, because once the cost of capital, let's say, is about, for example, 20%, you are looking at taking that money, investing it in assets, doing your business and getting a profit or a return. And if this return is less than 20%, you're in a loss. So this cost of capital, therefore, becomes your point of no return. So therefore, below this is danger for you, and therefore this level is what you need to know. So cost of capital is something you guys have to work out. One of the most important thing is, once you locate the source, you need to have referrals. You need to take referrals to check whether this particular investor has got previous successes and how has he stood by his investment. These are the things that you do. Believe me, they will do a background check on you. So there's no harm if you as entrepreneurs do referral checks on your investors. Keep a business plan ready, because nobody likes to have a wavering mind. So you be very clear why you want the money, what's your project, and who are all your team members in this project, and who are going to help you execute this plan. And most important is, how are you going to make your money? What is your economic model? What is your business model? And what is your revenue model? These should be very, very clear in your business plan. You should also be able to show the exit route to the investors and say, okay, you give me money and after so many years you're able to go. Now, if you're very clear and you have the proofs, you should have a proof and documentation for everything that you say, and you are able to present it well in a pitch. Today, there are umpteen websites which tell you how to make a pitch beautifully. You can go to our NEN Business Academy. You have a lot of these pitching techniques which are there in the videos. You can look at all these videos, study them, and see how best you can pitch. But one of the most important thing is that as entrepreneurs, when you're going for raising funds, you have to be very, very sure that the investor will come back to you if he's interested in your model to do a due diligence. Now, due diligence is a process where you throw open all your systems to these guys to come and inspect you to see if you are what you are that you say that you are. So due diligence is something very, very, very the thing that you have to be very careful about, because you can't duck around. You have to, what you say, you are walking the talk here. Now, due diligence happens in all cases, whether the investor is a strategic investor, venture capitalists, or angels, or any kind of people, banks. Any of these people will always do a due diligence on you, so be prepared for it. Once the due diligence is over, then you come to the next stage where you have to decide and negotiate on the terms of the borrowing or the equity or whatever the terms of agreement. And once the terms of agreement are negotiated on, for example, if they're coming in with you for equity, how much of control are you willing to liquidate? Now, this is by far one of the most difficult tasks for entrepreneurs, to let go your control. I have so many of my mentees who tell me, ma'am, I don't want the money, I don't want to lose control, right? So that's one thing you guys have to decide. It's your baby, right? But when do you let go? As entrepreneurs, if you are going to share your equity, then liquidation of your control, you have to be very, how much are you willing to let go your control? That's something you have to decide. And once this is decided, it comes in a form of a contract, which is called as a term sheet. Once you sign the term sheet, of course, and then the execution begins when the money comes in, and the milestones have to be decided, and then you meet and the payment starts. So this is the funding procedure. And of course, we saw what is the procedure. Now let's see, as investors, what do they look for before they give their money to you? Obviously, your business idea, your business model. Is your business model robust? What is your business model? Business model is a framework on which your entire business is set. So is your business set in terms of customer relationships, in terms of your key resources, in terms of your key activities, in terms of your revenue, in terms of your cost? Is your business model robust? And is it got the fantastic potential to earn more money? Is it the most happening thing? Do you have a fantastic team that is actually taking it forward? Is the team, not only the business model, the second thing is the team which is taking this business model across. That is one of the most important things that they see, is the passion of the team. So are they be able to give a good value growth? Are they good in value creation? Are they transparent, honest, creative? How much is the investment size? What stage the company is? And what is the risk tolerance? How much risk can they take? And what is the desired return on investments? So when you go for funding, of course, going for funding is good because it helps you to get money, it helps you to share your risks, and it also helps you to give you a better financial discipline, and you get a fantastic network because people who lend you money will make sure they give their network to you, otherwise you won't be doing well, right? So you hooking on to your investors network is one huge plus getting funding. But there's also a disadvantage. I wouldn't call it disadvantage. The flip side of getting funded is that sometimes the cost of capital itself is very, very high. And of course, you should be mentally prepared for a loss of control. And there will be a whole lot of reporting and extra paperwork, which is quite cumbersome sometimes. But if you look at, again, investors, if you look at it, and I can just bring it down to 5 C's, as they call it. One is the character of the person to whom they're going to lend, the capacity. Are they capable of taking the loan and returning back the loan? How much money do they require? And how much have they invested their own money into the system? And how much more money they require? Do they have any collaterals that they can support or give with? And what are the conditions that we can lay down in order to give this business? Or what are the conditions that we have to accept or put in to the entrepreneur in order to give the loan? So these are the 5 C's that usually an investor looks for before giving you money. So I'd like to end it with some tips. I would like to call them as tips, or the ABCD of funding. And I'd like to say one of the most important first tip is forget all this my PowerPoint. I just want to iterate one thing strong before I end, and that is, when you want to raise funds, please raise it even before you need the money. Don't make it a last-minute affair where you're desperate for money and you're running around and therefore you grab whatever money across. Whether you are a startup, whether you are a growth, whether you're in decline, no matter what, make it a business, a process. Funding is a process which you guys have to adopt, and at least make sure you do the research work, identify the source, check out, keep them in your network, sort of work on them so that when the time comes to take the money, you don't have to go searching and spend a whole lot of money, but instead it can be a very common, very cool approach to actually going and taking money. It's easier said. For me, it's easier to talk, and I know as entrepreneurs it's very difficult to do. But if we were to inculcate it as a part of a system, to look at this, because money is needed at every stage, we know that, right? So making it as a system wherein you keep on a lookout, identify these people so that they probably bring the money in, is something that we need to inculcate. So whether the amount required, adopt systems, keep your financial discipline, always have the best of information, keep in track of what's happening in the market, who's getting funded, where, how. This will also help you to put it in your book. The cost of capital I'd already talked to you about. Decide the terms, what you can do, which you're comfortable with before you go and talk to the guys during the term negotiation. Please exploit all your internal sources before you actually start going out, and find sources even before you need money. This is the most important tip that I can give you. Keep your accounts. Use as much as possible the technology to make sure that the accounts are on your fingertips and in your mobile. Whether it is with anybody, whether it is a formal or informal funding, right? I told you that many of us still we depend very heavily on the informal structure of funding. Even so, make sure you ink the terms. Let it not be when you borrow from your friends. Please ink the terms. Means which write it down, have it in a written document, just not verbal. This is something which is very difficult, but you have to just do it. And also decide the level of control that you would like to dilute. Study your investor's background, let's share the risk bhai, abhi akele kya. So make sure that you also decide the time period, you know. How much time are you going to have this burden of money or funding, or how long? If it's equity, of course, it's long term. If it is debt, then make sure you look at the time period at which you're looking. If any of these equity people who have come to you, like your venture capitalists or your angels, then look at the time period that they'll be with you before you go in for an IPO or buy them back from them. There are so many other exit routes. So with that, I come to a close of what I wanted to say, and I'm ready for question and answers. Thank you. Over to you.